Hello, everybody. Dumelang, Salibonani, Saubona, Muribuanje, Jambo, Molweni, bonjour, hola, and good day to you from wherever you may be watching this from. Thank you all so much for finding time to join this Africa Regional Breakout session. And if this is the first session you are attending, let me also officially welcome you to the 10th Economic and Social Council Youth Forum, more popularly known as ECOSOC Youth Forum. This is the Africa Regional Breakout session that will last for 90 minutes, and I will be your moderator. I am Khokhontlejang Paladi, 100% African, born and bred in Botswana. Today, we are focusing on the theme that is supporting the culture of innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship of African youth to build forward better for sustainable development. I have an amazing panel of incredible African young people who will be sharing their experiences, best practices, and what they have been doing with regards to innovation and creativity in their respective spheres of influence. And I hope later on, you as a participant will be able to share your experiences as well. Just to quickly mention that this regional breakout session is organized by the United Nations Office of the Special Advisor on Africa, that's UNOSA, the International Trade Center, and the Africa Regional Youth Caucus, with additional co-organization from UNESCO, the UNDP Regional Bureau for Africa, United Nations Volunteers, Child Solidarity Group, and the Association of Young Professionals of Water and Sanitation of Senegal, and the Africa Youth Advisory Board on Disaster Risk Reduction. So a huge thank you to all these stakeholders for all their tireless work over the last couple of weeks and months to put this together. And it couldn't have been easy because normally we'll be in the UN chambers right now in New York and having a physical meeting, but this is the new normal thanks to the pandemic. But regardless, we shall make it work. Just to share a couple of house rules before we begin our session. I would encourage all of us to be on mute on video and audio if you're not speaking. Let us engage respectfully. Remember that we have a chat option here. So in case if you want to share any commentary, any questions, or just put anything on the platform, please continuously use the chat platform for any engagement. And make sure that you take the conversation from this Zoom platform to those who are not able to join us through social media platforms. So make sure you are tweeting, you're Instagramming, putting it on TikTok or Facebook or whichever platform, and you are actually sharing the message using the official hashtag, that is hashtag youth 2030 Africa. That is hashtag youth 2030 Africa. Feel free to also tag some of the speakers here. If you know the Twitter handles, I'll make sure that I put my Twitter handle on the chat box as well for you to be able to tag me in the deliberations. So let's do that. Please do remember that this Africa Regional Breakout session is basically a platform that is created to ensure that we discuss the role and contribution of African young people to ensuring resilient recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic and achieving the decade of African action for a decade of action for sustainable development. So we are here to share experiences, best practices, recommendation, what has worked, and so on and so forth. So let us make sure we have a really constructive discussion. We are also having this breakout session or even the ECOSOC Youth Forum against the background of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has totally changed everything because it has affected all our lives, regardless of where we are or what we do. Particularly in Africa, according to IMF, it is estimated that the growth of Africa will decline or has declined by 5.4% in the previous year. And more than 26 million people in Africa have been thrown into extreme poverty just in the last year. This shows that we have a lot to do as African young leaders to ensure that we are part and parcel of resilient recovery post-COVID-19 pandemic, and we are not just spectators. Something very interesting that I also read recently from the World Health Organization is that last year, when the COVID-19 pandemic broke out and was announced as a public health emergency, we saw a lot of innovations in technology and in creative works all over the world coming up as a response to COVID-19. And according to the World Health Organization, 12.8% of those innovations were coming from Africa. This is extremely commendable because it shows the immense potential that we have in Africa that is still yet to be leveraged, that is still yet to be tapped on, and be used effectively to transform the continent and the livelihoods of Africa. Now I'm going to jump right into the session as we have an exciting panel of young people who are going to be sharing their experiences and all the wonderful work that they have been doing in their respective countries. I'm going to quickly introduce them in the interest of time so that we can move swiftly on this. First and foremost, we have Sicelo Dube. Passionately known as the STEM Lady, Sicelo Dube is the current Zimbabwe Science Ambassador, founder of LEC Biotech and Elevate Trust. She advocates for youth in STEM education, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And she's a girl leadership mentor and has a bias towards girl empowerment in all her projects. I love how she's so unapologetic about this. That's Sicelo waving. Moving on now to Alberto Francioloi. Alberto is a member of the Africa Youth Advisory Board on Disaster Risk Reduction, a platform for engaging African youth on issues related to disaster risk reduction. Alberto also works for Peri U, a consortium of 12 African universities focused on disaster risk education, research, and advocacy. Alberto, if you could just wave as well. Thank you. We also have Serge Honton. Serge is a development economist with 5 years of experience in development and poverty alleviation research in Africa. He is currently a research associate fellow in the AMES project at Moi University in Kenya, where he's researching the economies of refugees in Nairobi. He's also a founder of the Innovation Hub for Migration Research. We also have Laurence Kabasile. Laurence Kabasile Birungi is currently the AFRIAN Eastern Southern Africa President, a key platform which aims to promote meaningful youth participation through advocacy, political dialogue, and on the SDGs and sexual reproductive health and rights for young people. She has recently been nominated as the assistant in charge of young people in the presidential panel in DRC that is accompanying the president in his current mandate as AU chairperson. Feel free to also wave. We also have Kelly Eve Koopman. Kelly Eve is an activist who works across various mediums and platforms. She is an Atlantic Fellow alumni, a published author, and in her most recent political action, occupied a mansion in Camps Bay, Cape Town, with the queer land and justice collective called We See You. We also have Waven Muganda. Waven is a human rights activist from Mombasa, Kenya, and a Coraways Peace Building Fellow with a global network on women peace builders. Her work focuses on human rights, peace, and security, particularly in advocating for the inclusion of youth and women in the decision-making process. She's part of UNDP's 16 by 16 global initiative and an active citizen in her community. Last but not the least, we have Angela Muruli. Driven by her passion for gender equality and women's empowerment, Angela Muruli is a multifaceted and dynamic development practitioner currently working as a United Nations volunteer with UN Women Nigeria, specializing in women's political participation, impact-oriented communication strategies, and young women's transformational leadership. Those are the amazing young people we have on the panel with us today who will be taking part in this Africa breakout session. And do remember to please use the chat box if you want to put up any commentary. Use the official hashtag to put out your, to share the deliberations on social media. That is hashtag Youth 2030 Africa. And do remember that 30 minutes before we end this session, you and OSA would put a link to a survey post this meeting. And please do take a few minutes to fill out the survey. In case if you don't get the link, you will receive it by email immediately after the session as well. So do take a few minutes to fill out that survey. So jumping right into it, I'm going to start with our unapologetic girl mentor and girl activist, Sicelo Dube. Sicelo, looking at our theme for today, what would you say are the key policy measures to support the culture of creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship in Africa? And feel free to share a little bit of what you have done in your organization with regards to this.
Thank you, Gigi, and thank you for everyone who has joined us. So the issue of policy around creativity, innovation, science, and technology is a big issue, especially in Africa. You notice that if you are to stop and think even of the number of innovators that the young ones will talk about. I've been a teacher for 7 years at a school here in Zimbabwe called the Hellenic Academy. And all the time, the students will have to say something about people they aspire to be like, or to say something about innovators they know, or young people we've done great. They will not mention anyone from our country. They will not mention maybe even anyone from Africa. So the starting point is, in our education system, we need to talk about these things. The policies around education and curriculums need to make sure that they embed the culture of creativity and innovation from a young age. Let the students who are going to school grade 0, I don't know if there's grade 0 everywhere, but in Zimbabwe, the 4-year-olds, the 5-year-olds, they get into grade 0, grade 00. They should already start talking about innovation and creativity. Maybe smaller words like creativity, be creative. It should be a culture that's in the curriculum. Catch them young. So that is the first thing that comes into my mind. We need a curriculum that talks to this. And let it not just be a policy for Zimbabwe's education, but throughout Africa. The educational curriculums should agree on issues around creativity and innovation. And this is basic. It's basically saying the theory taught in the classroom should be applied afterwards. So let's have the clubs. Science Club. We as Elevate Trust, we've started what are called Innovators Hub Clubs. These Innovators Hub Clubs, they complement the curriculum. Currently, our Ministry of Education and our Ministry of Science and Technology, they are pushing Education 5.0. But then during the normal learning times, and especially now post-COVID, we are catching up. So there's not so much time for the teacher to say, let's just take time and go to the lab and do fun things and put the theory into practical action. However, we can have extra curriculum activities through the clubs. So it's important to also have clubs that are safe spaces for the students to come together and literally bring their theory they've learned to life. So if the educational curriculum are serious and they are loud on issues to do with innovation and creativity, and they also ensure that schools have these extra curricular activities, which are safe spaces for the students to experiment and do fun things. You know, it should not be something that we know about, which happens in America. It should be something that happens even in Africa. I've had the experience of being a Mandela Washington Fellow, and I've visited Drake University. I've visited schools around Iowa. And amazing classroom setups. You know, they have spaces where they can really think and go crazy and go technology, you know, application. We need that as well in Africa. So the curriculum needs to talk about that. We also need a policy that joins us together. Take a look now, we have the open trade. Africa is now one big market. But then if we don't have policies that are linking us as African countries towards innovation and entrepreneurship, we are going to go all scatter around and we won't really see the effects of this. So if these policies can be, you know, first country-wise and then be linked as policies that are implemented throughout Africa so that we move nicely together and the efforts are amplified in a simplified way through policy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sicelo. I think that's really profound, the inclusion of the curriculum and the policy to actually respond to the innovations that we need in Africa. You know, one thing I know about us as young people in Africa, we do have brilliant ideas. We do pitch them to our leadership, to our departments, to different stakeholders. We are always sending out proposals and engaging constructively. But there are so many roadblocks to getting your point ahead to try and implement anything innovative in Africa. Alberto, speaking from experience, what would you say are some of those roadblocks that young people face when they try to bring innovation? Alberto, you are on mute.
Sorry, apologies about that. I completely forgot I was on mute. Thank you very much, Gigi. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak. So there are many roadblocks, especially to African youth. We are very much marginalized and excluded from the many strategic opportunities in which to share ideas, in which to really share our expertise, share our knowledge, and share our innovation with the continent. And I think particularly at local decision-making and policy formation levels, youth are often excluded from contributing these ideas or voicing their opinions, especially voicing things that really fall within youth interests, I think. We feel very much of the time we're marginalized and we're sidelined. And more often than not, there's often a lack of resources available, such as money, time, or social capital to support youth-driven ideas and initiatives, especially at these local and national levels. Such strategic opportunities and resources are really necessary for providing support for such initiatives, but they remain very limited and they're extremely competitive. What will often happen is that you have international agencies come through and they'll say, here is a project that we want to do, and we only have this much funding for this many people. And what happens is that we have people from across the continent all competing for this one single thing. And unfortunately, maybe one or two people win, but then there are thousands who are left on the sidelines who just have to deal with, well, I tried. And I think this is a major blockage that we have, or major roadblock, I should say, that we have. And so there need to be more opportunities made to allow for youth to be part of these decision-making processes, to have these opportunities, especially to be part of intergenerational dialogue, because I think that's the big factor, is that we need to have youth really present in these strategic engagements, especially with policymakers, with our elders, really, to say that, we are the youth, and the youth make up about 60% of the African population. Our interests need to be there, and our interests need to be heard, and we need to be engaged with. I know, for example, UNESCO have been involved in many opportunities to try and allow youth to speak, to voice their opinions. In particular, last year, we organized a webinar with alongside with UNESCO, with the African Youth Advisory Board for Disaster Risk Reduction, on youth engagement on COVID-19 for the Africa we want in 2020. And this really mobilized young people and encouraged youth-led action to support local communities to spread information about COVID-19, about how to overcome this, how to build up resilience against the virus, to try and create strategies in which to share information and share knowledge, and to really make youth agents of change in which to drive this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Alberto. I think I agree with you that there's a serious deficit of opportunities. Maybe quickly moving to Serge, I'm going to ask you the same question that I had asked Sicelo, but now maybe responding to the challenges or the roadblocks that Alberto has spoken to. What would you say are the kind of policy measures that are needed to overcome or override the roadblocks that Alberto was talking about? Serge?
Yeah, thank you so much, Gigi. Welcome everyone on this session. Yeah, as challenge and as my predecessor said so far, especially Dubai, I would say that education is a key, especially in Africa. But in my field work, I always advocate for refugees and migrants in a host country. Because you know that if we are talking about young African and there are some vulnerable population, and if we don't talk about them, and we know that they are most of the time disregarded. So my policy most of the time is always related to them. So I would say I'm an activist of them. I advocate for their well-being and also everything that will help them to be innovative in their host country. So the first the challenge or recommendation that I can give for the policymaker to help them to be more innovative in their host country, because I'm talking about refugee or migrant, because if they are in the host country, if the host country is innovative, but them they are not, or they don't have their well-being, that means something is lacking. So that's the reason why I would like to base my point on refugees or the migrant in the host country. So the first recommendation I can give is to include them in the host country. When you include them, they have the capability to show their potential, to show what they are capable of. And the second one I can about is to help them to get like business lessons. I'm talking about business lessons because of I've been on the field and they realize that when the refugees are given the opportunity to come out to express themselves, they do well. If you take the example of Isli in Kenya, Nairobi, they are the Somali refugee. I mean, there are some people they are doing great job. They have their business, but the issue is they don't give them the opportunity to express themselves. For instance, I met one of them. They said, "What? We are harassed every single day by police. We don't have peace of mind to do our business in peace. And we know that those people, they always bring cheap item of stuff to sell in the host country, and the host community come and buy from them and go and sell it back in their local community. I mean, so they should give them the opportunity, express themselves. They should allow them to have business license, and then they will be more innovative. For instance, I also met a lady from DRC Congo. She's also a refugee. She started her business selling item, I would say Africa fabric. But later on, the people who are in charge of collecting taxes or whatever, they came and they closed down the shop, saying what she was not allowed to start a business. That means if they can help them, they can allow them, they can give them opportunity, they will do well. They won't rely on the host community. They will be innovative. And those people, let me tell you that when they have business, they always employ the host community people. They employ them and they work for them. They are more entrepreneurial. They don't wait for a business or work from anyone or the government that hosts them before starting their own business. So from that, I would say that they should stop police harassment, I mean, and also giving another talk. I would
And
say
maybe we'll take the other challenge just in the second round. Thank you very much for that, Serge.
Right.
I think you mentioned really important legislative bottlenecks, which are quite a nightmare. You know, I always say, why is it that in Africa it's easy for somebody who's a foreigner to come in and register a business, but for a local it can be a complete nightmare, or to have access to funding to start a business or to fund an organization. These are some serious bottlenecks that need to be tackled. And talking about restricted access to funding, I'm going to go to Laurence Kabasile. So Laurence, what would you say young people in Africa can do to enable them to access funding that is necessary to develop their products and services? You know, because sometimes you have the idea, you don't have the funding to develop it from a prototype, from an idea to a prototype, from a prototype to a product, you know. So what can young people do to access this necessary funding?
Thank you very much, Gigi. Hi to everyone. So for me, I think young people should work with private-public partnership to leverage resource mobilization. And us as young people, we should see how we could really position ourselves to have corporate social responsibility funding with different partners. So, and make them understand the impact of them investing in our product. I'm just going to get an example on what happens in DRC and how AFRIAN helps young entrepreneurs to have access to the opportunity of fundings. We have here in DRC what they call Makutano. It's something that is known everywhere now, and we have different private sectors that come in DRC, in Kinshasa, all over the world, and we even have sport people that come. Last year, not last year, but the other year, we had Samuel Eto'o that came, and us as AFRIAN, we collaborate with partners and Makutano to have a youth pre-Makutano, where we position young people's innovation and bring those different actors to see what young people have done so that they could mobilize on their foundings, but also do our best that the best innovators or young, during the youth pre-conference, we do our best to see how we can select the best innovators to be in the biggest Makutano, because usually it's even open. I think the other year it was opened by the DRC president, and there we have all types of private partners where young people can easily have access to mobilization of their products so that it could go into the market. But also now we have what we call Semaine de la Science. In English, it means Week of Science, where we bring, where there is Invest in People, an organization that is named Invest in People. And AFRIAN has worked with them for this year so that we could put young people to participate and also show the innovations that they have done so that they could have access to fundings, because it's a 1 week activity which allows young people to show their potential, their creativity, and also to mobilize funds. So that's the way we help young people as a network that support young people's entrepreneurship to have access to fundings. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Laurence. And can I just say that you guys, the work that you're doing is really amazing and commendable, and keep it up. I hope that other young people in other countries as well are learning from what AFRIAN DRC has been doing to help young people access funding. I'm going to go now to Kelly Eve. And Kelly Eve, what would you say are foundational support from governments or elsewhere do young people in Africa need to unleash that innovative and creative ideas that can help towards ending poverty and achieving the 2030 agenda? What kind of fundamental and quintessential support do young people need from their governments?
Unmute? Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Am I unmuted? Cool. I think two things here is that, it's very difficult to have this conversation without talking about structural inequality and the ways in which, the kind of global south, global north system and the system of extraction and of exploitation that exists on the African continent, as well as its kind of partnering relationship to government corruption and government apathy, really stifles creativity and innovation with young people. In South Africa and elsewhere, it's no secret that we have over-indebted youth, unemployed youth. And what I think I find frustrating as someone who works in the sector of trying to raise funding specifically for arts innovation projects is that there's still this focus on the labor, right? Like the outcome, the project, the statisticizing of what the impact will be. And I mean, we simply can't invest in the imaginations of our young people if we're always supposed to be innovating under crisis, and not actually just being given the kind of infrastructural support to imagine, to design, think, to come up with solutions at the, as one of the other panelists was saying, there's this constant competition and this constant like, how does this thing work? You know, how are you going to measure it? When is it going to have an impact? And we can't really develop the infrastructure around what we're doing without meaningful investment simply into the capacity of young people and simply into our ability to exist, to eat, to have Wi-Fi and office space, to be able to sit and not be functional by only our labor, but to invest in the collective imagination. And I think this is the thing that also keeps us, you know, kind of global north, global south dichotomy going, because here we have labor class and extraction class. And elsewhere, there's myriad opportunity for kind of resource-driven engagement. And for me, I mean, I feel like especially young people here are beyond the idea of government participation and capacitating government to assist us. Where we have our best successes are where we engage in direct democracy, where it's people-driven, where it's unfortunately despite government rather than participatory with government. So I really think there needs to be a decentralized approach to capacitating rather than extracting, and to investing with the good faith that it is a long-term investment in the collective imagination and innovation of the youth, or else we'll continue this kind of structure of labor remuneration and what is the outcome, you know, what is the and kind of keep us on the rat race. And I think, for example, especially with, you know, the kind of disaster of COVID, the examples of impact and of community-oriented creative solutions that came despite government were far more interesting than us looking at things like taking out more debt to grow the concept of the economy or kind of disseminating resources in a haphazard manner. Our creative and radical solutions and our creative and radical action require creative and radical funding. So it's an appeal really to how we view funding on African continent as to capacitate rather than to create competition.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Kelly. I'm just looking quickly at the chat box, and I can see that somebody had left a comment saying this is an amazing session, but it's a shame it's only in English and no French translation available. This is Sasha. Sasha, I just wanted to say deep apologies that we could not arrange for translation at that time. Our aim is always to be as inclusive as possible, but because we are adjusting to having this session virtually and had to deal with a couple of other modalities, at this time we could not be able to have all language translation or more inclusive translation. But I believe that once the report is available for this breakout session, you may be able to access it in different languages. So thank you for that. And now I'm going to quickly move on to Waven. And the question I'm going to ask Waven is very interesting. Somebody in the chat box was actually just asking right now, what are the principal challenges that Africa is facing currently? This was asked by Shock. I think that's how you pronounce your name. So I was actually going to ask Waven a similar question, that what are the major challenges that are currently stopping or preventing African countries or Africa as a whole to realize our SDG targets and priorities?
Thank you, Gigi. I'm really honored to be here today and speak on this issue. I think that poverty can no longer be an excuse for Africa in 2021. Not that we aren't poor and not that there are no poor people, but really poverty and lack of humanitarian aid cannot be one of the reasons why young Africans and Africans are not able to realize their ideas and their dreams and even achieve the SDGs. I think some of the challenges that are facing Africans or Africa as a continent is the limited rights and freedoms of the African people. Like Kelly said, we cannot talk about innovation without talking about systemic inequalities, systemic structures. We cannot talk about this without mentioning how our institutions of governance and democracy are very weak. have a lot of bureaucracy. The corruption is really, really high. And there's a lack of clear relationship between policies and the realities. So when policymakers are coming up with laws and policies on how young people can get into entrepreneurship or universities, these laws and policies are designed without involving and including the voices of other young people who face additional layers of discrimination. So like young people in rural areas, young people from underprivileged backgrounds, young refugees, young persons with disabilities. And so when it comes to the reality, these policies and laws actually do not make any sense. Of course, exclusionary systems of governance is a very huge challenge in many African countries. And you find that governance systems of the governments are set up and designed for very long, perhaps as a result of colonial injustice. But the way the systems are set up is to exclude groups or individuals that do not fit in the in society's idea of who a person is. So if someone has a disability, we don't even know how to work with them. We don't know how to talk to them. We don't know how to make dreams come a reality. We do not know how to design products that work for them. How do we design social media to work for people who cannot see, who cannot hear, people who may not be able to have hand mobility? And finally, I think historical injustices, we as Africans need to start demanding for justice. We need to hold people accountable. We need to hold institutions. We need to hold governments, our own governments and international governments accountable for all the injustices that exist. I'll give an example of, right now, we have the COVID-19 vaccine, and there are patents and there are restrictions. And I don't think that Africa lacks medical professionals who can come up with a vaccine. In fact, I think many African professionals have contributed to the development of the vaccine. But why do we have to wait for donations? Why do we have to be asking or be buying vaccines at extremely higher prices than other countries? What we Africans should start doing is to demand for justice and to reject any system that continues to put us in a dependency mode, and start leveraging on our resources. Our resources, our human resource, our natural resources are fueling development in foreign countries. Why can't we do it for ourselves? Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Within, for that. I think you've said really profound things. A few years ago, the Africa Regional Breakout session for ECOSOC Youth Forum was actually focusing on corruption, because we cannot ignore the fact that this is the biggest problem we have or challenge we are facing to our progress and development in Africa, because the total money that we lose to corruption every single year is more than the total development aid that we receive. So unless we deal with corruption and economic crime, it will continue to impede our progress in Africa. You ended off on a really high note by sharing that we should stop waiting for donations or handouts or for solutions to come from the West. We should come up with the solutions in Africa. So I'm going to go straight to Angela right now. And Angela, I just ask you, what do you think are the transformative and innovative interventions that African youth in particular can come up with to help scale up action to achieve the decade of action? What are those concrete things that young people in Africa can do? Angela.
Well, thank you very much, Gigi. Really glad to be here. So I think, firstly, African youth don't lack creativity, talent, or innovation. I think it really depends on which sector or area you're working with. That's going to vary. But what we really need to be concentrating on is, to what extent do we have an enabling environment for African youth to actually flourish? I think that's the real question here, actually. So my experience is coming from volunteering with UN Women here in Nigeria as an international youth volunteer. And I think what goes into having an enabling environment is actually issues such as mentoring and sponsorship for youth. I think we really need to go away from tokenism and ensure that we're actually talking, we're actually walking the talk rather. And coming off the back of the Commission on the Status of Women, the SG's report had strong recommendation for young women's inclusion, for instance, in politics. And I think that can translate across all spheres. So in Nigeria, for example, we have the lowest representation of women in politics in Africa, which is 5%. And if you mirror that with the young women activists who have championed rallies to bring about a state of emergency on gender-based violence, as we have now in Nigeria, or the Feminist Coalition, who notably and famously supported and were a critical element of the NSARS movement. Many of these young women are entrepreneurs, they're lawyers, they're journalists who have adapted their skills and their knack for social change to lead movements. All they need really is an enabling environment that takes cooperation, as Alberto earlier said, it takes intergenerational dialogue. I mean, it really takes us being intentional about young women's leadership. And I'm speaking a lot about young women's leadership because that's how it relates to myself. And so I actually think the onus is not on young people. I think young people are very capable of innovating in whichever way they need. Or they want to, but it's very much on governments, it's on organizations, it's on our managers. And just to give you some very quick practical ideas of what that looks like, just before I leave this question, I mean, for us, for instance, it's like our country representative trusting me to lead and influence in the biggest procurement process of the year during the recently gone International Women's Month, or for our senior management team allowing young women within the organization to actually lead on initiatives that are about young women, such as our Generation Equality Fora. So that's just my little 2 pence on that. I think it's very much about enabling environments, and we need to shift the focus from what can youth do, but actually what can influence people with the power and influence do.
Absolutely fantastic. And maybe just before you go off on that point, Angela, I think you said something very important. It's not just about what youth can do, but it's also about what the people in power can do to create an enabling environment, because like I said earlier, young people do come up with the innovations, the ideas, the solutions, but they're not met with an enabling support system for them to thrive and implement. I want to ask you a critical question. Many times during conferences and meetings, we always say we need political will of leaders. How do we motivate political will? Angela, how do we motivate that will from leaders to support and create an enabling environment?
It's a good question. I mean, it's very difficult. So volunteering and having been volunteering under the Women's Political Empowerment, project here with UN Women, it's definitely been a struggle, because what we're trying to do is lobby legislators and get them to see not only is it women and young women's human rights to advocate and to be influencing change in their communities, but it's also, there's a business case to it. And I think all of us in this space know that. So what is really important is for international organizations such as the UN, such as the World Bank, some of our donors and funders, but also civil society organizations to continue lobbying legislators to keep on applying the pressure. And I think just a good example of how we've done that, for instance, at UN Women, we have the He for She campaign, which is a male solidarity campaign for gender equality. And recently, our Minister of Women Affairs, or over the past 2 years, has been recognizing governors who actually take up the mantle of He for She and who are putting young women, especially, and women in positions of leadership. And I think it's that kind of pressure that and that kind of recognition to show that, even if you don't have the political will in itself, actually, this is where the world is going, and you better jump on the bus or you're going to get left behind. For me, I think it's definitely the pressure and the influence that those of us in the wider global community can put together to support civil society organizations who are already doing great work.
Absolutely, absolutely beautiful. I love that. It's about applying the pressure and being, just persevering. I think sometimes we become too impatient as young people when things don't start going our way without realizing that, change is actually a process and not an event. So it will take time, but we should at least keep on putting the pressure. You said something very important about the absence, the missing face of women in leadership. This is a problem all over Africa, and it's something that really bothers me because the face of poverty is female, the face of struggle is female, the face of marginalization is female, the face of your rights being denied is female, yet we don't see females in decision-making tables. So I'm going to go to you again, Sicelo, very briefly, just to share with us, how can we ensure that as we're talking about equal access to opportunities of innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship, young women and girls are not left behind?
Thank you for that, Gigi. It's a very important question, and the issues around girls, especially in science and technology, it's an issue that is very close to my heart. So what I've seen, especially in Africa, it starts from the social norms, where as a girl, it's kind of prescribed that why are you playing outside like that with those bricks and stones? Why are you pushing those bricks? But the boys can push the bricks and they can want to buy cars, So from the time you are young, there's so much prescription around what a girl can do and what a boy can't do. So when it comes to the field of science, technology, engineering, and maths, the girl child is already taking a backseat to say, I can do this, I can't do that. So we go back to the socialization where girls should not only get dollies, but they should also get the building blocks. They should also get the electric wires and make their own circuits and be excited about blowing up the house. Okay, not necessarily blowing out the house, but there are some things that are left for the boys and some things left for the girls at a very young age. So we need to start from there. I think it begins at home before we even go on to say the educational sector should do this or policies should say this. But I think the fundamental bit for girls to be found in all these places where we want them found for gender equality, for me, I strongly feel it's an issue that starts from home. It's a socialization and cultural issue, and it should be dealt from the root. Thank you.
Perfect. I think that's really profound, Sicelo. And I say that's really profound because many times when we talk about gender equality or gender parity, we never talk about the social construct, which is really important, because we are a product of socialization. So before we even go to policy changes and measures and mechanisms, we need to make sure that the mindsets of the people are changed, of the society that they live in. So thank you very much for that. And I think there's something that just crossed my mind as you're talking, is that we really need to also stop looking at gender equality as a women and girls issue. I find this a lot of the time in Africa, whenever gender equality becomes, girls issue, women's issue, it needs to be everyone's issue, because it's a human rights issue. And of course, ensuring girls and women have access to equal opportunities is not a favor, but it's actually a right to them. So we need to just reaffirm such messages. I'm going to now quickly go to Alberto, once more. What would you say young people in Africa should do to ensure that their voices, their experiences, their expertise and ideas are heard, particularly in the space of climate action, which is something that doesn't feature much or you hear about in Africa a lot?
Thanks very much, Gigi. And I just want to quickly say I completely agree with Angela and Sicelo with regards to addressing issues with regards to gender and STEM. It's something that I find happens a lot on my other side of work, where I work with the peri universities, where we often find a lot of female scientists, a lot of female researchers working in the areas of disaster risk. They have a much higher dropout rate compared to their male counterparts. And I think especially in countries like Mozambique, which have had several cyclone disasters in the last couple of years, we're finding so many women dropping out of these programs. And there's a lot of emphasis placed on ensuring men go through the program, but there isn't enough security provided to women or enough support for women to continue their studies, especially when you go to postgraduate and master's level. So I just want to say I really support this cause, because I think it's, as we can't, as soon as we uplift women, I think we uplift everyone, and I think that's a message that needs to be taken across the continent. Thanks for the clicks, but I'll get back to the question you actually asked me about how to ensure that voices, experiences, and expertise are brought forward. So while the majority of youth across the African continent are considered the most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and to other disasters on the continent, they're also recognized as amazing agents of change, as an untapped resource for climate adaptation and mitigation efforts. It is vital, however, that youth are not kept marginalized, as I said before, in these efforts, and we are provided an inclusive space in which to engage in order to have our voices, experiences, expertise, and ideas heard. So the African Youth Advisory Board, the organization I work for, we engage on behalf of youth on disaster risk reduction related issues, which often coincide with climate mitigation and other related efforts. So we engage with government agencies, NGOs, academic institutions, with various UN organizations. And we seek to promote enhanced engagement and inclusion of youth and youth interests, particularly at local and national levels. And it's particularly important that not only do we engage with youth across the continent, but also youth at a global level as well. The African Youth Advisory Board, we're collaborating with our partners in other Southern Hemisphere countries, and in the Asian, the Pacific regions. We're working with UN-Inspire to share our knowledge with one another. We're also working with helping to establish a Caribbean network, actually, of youth in the field of disaster risk reduction. But in particular, how young people can get more involved and how they can have their voices heard is that I think we really need to mobilize youth. We need to really encourage them to get out there and to speak their minds. And I think there was actually a very interesting question that was brought up somewhere in the chats where they were saying, somebody I can't remember the name, sorry, I have to check it back again. They said from Namibia that they're finding an issue is that youth don't want to be involved. And maybe that's true. Maybe the reason why youth don't want to be involved is because we've been marginalized for so long. They sort of feel, why do I want to spend all this energy and time and resources in doing something where I feel that I'm not going to be heard anyway? And I think that is the biggest hurdle, is that we really need to ensure we get into these spaces. So we need to encourage people that we must find these agencies such as UNESCO, such as UNDP, localized NGOs, etc., that really do, where youth advocacy is a big part of their function. And we need to get involved with them. We need to work with them. And we also need to figure out how, through these organizations, we need to figure out how do we contact our local leaders. We really got to start from the bottom up, I think. We really got to start with local leaders who can take it on to national, to regional, to continental leadership. And I think one of the things that we really
Thank you so much.
Oh, sorry, I've used up my time.
We've run out of time, but hopefully you can add that after we come back from the question and answer session. But thank you for that. I'm going to go to Serge. I'm just trying to make sure that we stick to time so that we have a few minutes to actually pick up some questions from the chat box, so that it's not just us talking, but we also interact with the audience. And please do remember, if you have questions and they are to a particular speaker, just write, maybe say Alberto, and ask the question, and I'll read it just before we finish the session. So I'm going to go to Serge for your second question, and just share a little bit on what has been the role of science in facilitating the culture of innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship, particularly focusing on with regards to African youth.
Oh, okay. Once again, thank you, Gigi. In terms of innovation or what science has done so far, I can say that science has done a lot for African and young people, because I realized that while interacting with some young people, I find out that they have an innovative idea. In Africa, can you imagine that we didn't take all the steps of technology, but we jump, I would say, for instance, by creating the mobile money or mobile wallet. When I take the case of Kenya and M-Pesa, that has been initiated by young people, young man who created that app, and nowadays it's let's say in all over in Africa. And so in terms of fighting COVID, it's really helped a lot to fight against COVID, because they say the spread of the disease is through contact. So they just come out and impose this like imposing to facilitate or the transfer of money through mobile to mobile, and it avoid a lot of the contact of the money. So I can say on that, I would say young people, science has done a lot, because without science, we couldn't have a such app to transfer money easily. So I will also say that science also help, for instance, when you take the internet access in Africa, because we don't have a good internet access, but the little bit we have, we try to rationalize. We use it on our own to really develop a lot of things. If I met some young people, when they complete their university degree, they just, because of internet, they just work online remotely. Without moving from their country to another country, but they are still in their country, they work for remotely, they are freelancer, and I think that is also a great thing that science has helped us to do in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that recommendation, very concise and very clear, Serge. I'm going to quickly read another recommendation that's interesting from the chat box, and this is from Keith Andere, and Keith is saying, as a matter of priority, my recommendation would be to mobilize African member states to adopt and ratify the Malabo Convention on Cybersecurity and Africa Digital Transformation Strategy, as this will harmonize the tech sector in Africa. I thought it's important to mention that because, you know, as we're talking about mobilizing ourselves and advocacy in Africa, as young Africans, it's important to be aware of the instruments that exist there. Some of them our countries have actually signed to, but are not implementing and enforcing. So it's important that we use these instruments to motivate that political will for domestication and implementation at the country level. So thank you so much, Keith, for that recommendation. I'm going to go now to Laurence. Laurence, part of your mandate in AfriYen is ensuring gender equality and inclusion of girls. So I'm just going to ask you the same question that I'd asked Sicelo around how we ensure that girls have equal opportunities when it comes to participating in culture, innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship in Africa. And feel free to share some best practices from DRC.
Thank you very much, Gigi. I'm just going to complete what Sicelo said. I think it will be also important for having mentorship programs for young girls for their development and learning, which will allow us to play a positive influential role by providing them advice and guidance, and making them benefit from an environment that will allow their dreams become true. So I'm just going to give an example. I know when I took up the mandate of AfriYen, I got directly mentors, and I'm glad that I have a moderator who is a mentor to me, Gigi. Gigi, you came directly to mentor the incoming EC. We have Levi, we have Tikala, we have Patrick, and we have seen that we have mentors in our generations, and we have mentors who are higher of our generation. So in AfriYen DRC, we are implementing a project that is called Kitumaini, which means hope. We are implementing it in 4 provinces of DRC. And that mentorship program, which means hope, is where we are getting in school and out school young girls to have mentors in different sectors that will guide them to realize their dreams. And we have 2 types of mentors, because for a young girl to be creative, to realize her dreams, she has also to be in good health, because the mandate of AfriYen also is to have young people have access to information and services regarding their sexual reproductive health and right. So we have like senior mentors and we have junior mentors. So junior mentors are like assistant mentors who are guiding those young girls on issues regarding their health issues, how they can guide them. And we have done tools with UNFPA because it's supported by UNFPA, where they are guiding those young girls regarding their health. But we also have senior mentors where we have women who have succeeded in life. We have pilots, we have young girls, young leaders from organizations, we have militaries, we have policy women, and all from different sectors just to mentor them. And those are the girls who are themselves choosing which mentor they would like regarding their affiliation of the dreams they would like to become. So if they want to become a pilot, so the young girl will directly choose a pilot mentor who will be showing her how to go in life, how her courses have to be, and also show the practice to be a pilot. How should you do, how should you arrange your issues? And even this year, we are planning them to even start flying with the pilot mentor. If you're a doctor, you'll go to the hospital and you'll be led by the doctor who is your mentor to show you, to start touching your dream before it becomes true. So that's the mentorship program that we have put in place. And I think it will make that girls have an environment which will become equal environment and opportunities. Thank you.
Absolutely great. Thank you so much for that, Laurence. And I'll just take a comment now from Sadia Toure, who was supposed to be one of the panelists, but unfortunately she lost her voice yesterday, so could not join the Zoom call, but she had sent in a comment responding to this question. And she said a couple of points, but I'll just pick on this one, where she said that girls must be offered role models at an early age in all areas: writing, art, photography, politics, science, painting, and show them that another world is possible. Beyond the traditional professions, we must create extracurricular initiatives for girls so that they discover other professions that create jobs, which contribute to the development of a country, and especially alternatives to self-employment, which is entrepreneurship. I guess that really buttresses what you were saying right there, Laurence. So thank you very much about giving alternatives to the girl child. I'm going to open up for us to start taking questions because we are left with just a little under 30 minutes before we wrap this up. So if you want to ask a question to a particular speaker, please do so on the chat box. I'm seeing a lot of these are actually comments, which is really awesome and helpful, but do leave a few questions and I'll read them out to our speakers before we finish this. Now I'm going to go quickly to Kelly Eve. And Kelly Eve, I think I'm going to go back to a question I had asked one of the speakers around what foundational support from governments is needed to ensure that they create an enabling environment, or they help us to unleash the innovation and creativity from young people in Africa. You know, I think we've had a couple of comments, but I want us now to also zero in on the kind of comments or recommendations that young people who are listening right now, they can run with after the Zoom call. What can they do to directly engage their leaders to ensure that they support them to unleash their talents and innovation? Kelly Eve.
Okay, so not to be spicy, but to be a little bit spicy, the first thing the government can do is not steal money from us, and that would be nice. But I think what personally, I don't have a lot of faith in the structures of governance that we find ourselves in. Like when we talk about feminism and girls, right, what we have also patriarchal structures. And what that means is not just structures that are filled with men. What that means is structures that operate in a very particular way on a global scale, and that are not based in practices of care, or like in South Africa here, you know, we had the amazing Freedom Charter and the transition into democracy, and found all those values just kind of dissipated. What I find exciting that's happening here, and I don't know what it's like in other spaces that I'm very like keen to hear from is that there's a very much more like narrative around localized municipal councillors kind of creating better leadership on a more local level to kind of infiltrate communities on a more practical, praxis-based approach, because we've kind of given up on lobbying government and trying to stand in front of the gates of parliament and get policy shifts going. And with that, there's been a movement or a bill passed here that says that, you know, people who are not politically affiliated can run as independent candidates, which means youth can run and youth activists can run and people who are actually doing the work can run. So I think, I mean, with my disdain for the political system, I think this idea of localized approach and like let people who live in communities and understand the challenges and solutions take what is considered the lower lying positions of governance, where a lot of stuff actually gets done, and where perhaps, you know, there are less barriers, although there is still corruption, there's still risk involved, and start kind of block by block or community by community using the infrastructure that's already there is perhaps an exciting notion to step away from this kind of like bureaucratic system that really has not invested in the well-being of the youth.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I love what you said, just stop stealing our money. That is the first thing.
It's going to be nice.
And that's the first revolutionary thing that should actually happen, you know. But we, as earlier on, I don't know if it was Sitwela who was saying we should demand for change, you know. So we have to be the ones that have to hold them accountable and say, stop stealing our money. I'm going to quickly take a question from the Q&A section. This is from Megaki Agency, and I'm really sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. And Megaki said, how can youth across Africa collaborate in businesses and possibilities of accessing finance as youth without nepotism and discrimination? Wavin, do you want to take that since you were the next speaker?
Sorry, kindly repeat that.
How can youth across Africa collaborate in business and possibilities of accessing finance as young people without nepotism and discrimination?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I think that funding has become very limited, especially for young people who are still struggling to get a number of years of experience or expertise in different fields, and collaboration and partnerships is surely the way to go. Using sectoral platforms or platforms like this, like the Youth Forum and other spaces where young people engage, whether it's social or whether it's for school purposes or work purposes. I think we young people can be more intentional about finding people with similar interests, similar ideas, and looking at what are the best ways to collaborate and partner in ways that would benefit. I think when you're applying for grants as a consortium is stronger than if you're applying as a youth-led entity. So embracing the spirit of Ubuntu and just really being deliberate about our partnerships, our intentions, and we don't really have to now within ourselves, although that is important, but I think intergenerational and intersectional partnerships would be the way to not only strengthen our ideas and our innovations, but really ensure that we tap into the limited resources that are available.
Absolutely, that's true. I agree with you. Thank you very much for that, Wavin. And Angela, I'm going to give this one to you. This is from Efetubo, Stephanie Efevutu. And Stephanie says, how can we ensure that we create awareness on the SDGs to young people, especially to those without access to technology and those at the grassroots level, and also enlighten them on how they can contribute to the achievement of the SDG? I think that's a very important question, because even in my country, I can tell you an average young person probably does not know what SDGs are or how they can contribute to that achievement. Angela, do you want to take that in 2 minutes?
Yes, I can. Please permit me just to have my video off. I'm scared that the rain is going to disrupt my network. So yeah, I think it's quite straightforward. It's all about localizing the SDGs. I think one of the great ways the UN system does that is through the work of national staff and community volunteers who are national volunteers. And I think that applies for the whole development sector. You see the people, the knowledge, the people with the skills, the ability to really affect change in communities, our national staff, local staff. And I think we need to continue investing in them, because many of them also make up, the large majority of African youth. And I think also one thing that really stuck out to me when I first started working here in Nigeria, being part of a consortium called Young UN, we were very keen to bring and introduce things like recycling bins in Nigeria, etc. And one of my colleagues, she's our national officer, just said to me, but is that what Nigerian youth want? Is that what they need? Of course, climate change is a huge issue, but she was like, is that the issue that's important to them? So I think it's very much about localizing the SDGs, but also seeing what are the priorities for communities, not just, coming in full blast with our 10 plus SDGs and trying to apply all of them, but actually what.
Hello, Angela. Okay, I think we lost Angela there for a bit. She did mention that she's experiencing some heavy rains and that might affect her connectivity, but I think we've had the gist of her intervention, her answer. So thank you so much for that, Angela. And I'm going to go to another question, and I think this one is for Sicelo. It says, adopting such a mechanism in our school is great. I guess they're referring to your suggestion on having the curriculum, right? So, however, how could innovation be promoted by teachers who have a conventional way of thinking, and innovation is something they lack knowledge on, especially teachers from rural areas?
True. I saw that. And you know what? It's very true. And right now, teachers are just concentrating on academics, especially in Africa. I've had the experience of teaching at a government school and also teaching at a private school. At a rural school, all that is important is that you go home with that report with the blue mark and an A star. That is what's very important to the teacher. So teachers who generally feel it's wasting time to talk about creativity or innovation, whether you can make a solar lamp, whether you can purify the water for everyone to drink water from the dam, it's not very important to them right now, because what will take you to university are your grades. So if we go back to the policy and implement creativity and innovation as something that is fundamental in the education system, everything will come to place, because the teacher will do what the headmaster says. The headmaster will do what the district education officer says. He will do what the provincial director says. He will do what the minister says. So it cascades. And if it's changed on policy level, it will give the teachers that room to say, this week cannot end without us being creative and innovative. And we also need to ensure that the universities kind of change their way of doing things in Africa. You know, in America, my experience was, if there's something else that matters than your A grade. Have you been in a club? Have you been enrolled in cricket? Have you been doing something that helps your community? All those are points that give you entry to the best universities. So in the same way, you know, Africa needs to say, if you're an innovator and you did not do well in English, but you have an outstanding innovation that has helped your community, can that not be a point, an extra point to get you a university place to study engineering? You know what I mean? Because already you have it in you. So the rural teacher will listen to the headmaster, and the headmaster needs to get it from a policy level. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. That's true. That's true. We can change the mindset from all levels. And at the end of the day, everybody respects authority. Thank you very much for that, Sicelo. And here's a question for Serge. Serge, here's a question. As ICT continues to aspire to achieve sophisticated advancement and innovation, how can we ensure that the many people who are left out of the basics of ICT are not left out? For example, providing faster internet across Africa at an affordable rate. So do you want to take that quickly in 2 minutes?
All right, thank you, Gigi. So what I can say about those who are left behind is, so the government, our government should assure that we have, for instance, normally internet is not a job of the public sector. It's mostly for the private sector to give high-speed internet in our country. But if the government can come in and help give more support to private sector, for instance, the telecommunications sector, to help them, and then they will be able, for instance, to finance them, to give them some money, and they will be able to have more material that will help them to boost the speed of the internet, especially in the coastal country, those countries in the coastal area. It should include what we call the fiber in the internet speed. That will also help to reach even those who are in the rural area. I think I try to answer your question.
Absolutely true. I think this is also something that's very broad, and it can honestly be a bigger conversation because, you know, there's always that challenge that technology is great and amazing, but it can also widen the gap of inequality. So it's a matter of the stakeholders ensuring that they go an extra mile to ensure that it's inclusive in terms of access, affordability, and even literature around using technology as well. So thank you so much for sharing that, Serge. The last question I'll ask before I quickly wrap up the session, because we're about 40 minutes before we finish, is from Abisola Shofoyeke. Abisola says, how do you feel African youth can foster a culture of peace and unite with one another given their different yet collective environments? I'm going to take an answer from Sadia Toure. As I said, unfortunately, she couldn't be with us today, but she has provided an answer to your question, Abisola, and she said that it's important to increase young people's participation in peace building, and to ensure that it's important to, number one, create jobs and projects aimed at empowering them. 2, provide young people with quality training that meets market needs so that they are employable. 3, train many young people on conflict resolution mechanism, non-violent conflict management, etc. Create partnerships with young local leaders to raise awareness among the population. To engage young women in peace building efforts. And she also said to use the talent of young people, such as artists, singers, slammers, filmmakers, bloggers, and others, to advocate and raise awareness on peace building. I believe those really answer your question, Abisola. Now, we're just left with about 10 minutes to wrap up the session. And I always say that, you know, it's good to dialogue and share experiences, best practices, and learn of all the wonderful work that you're all doing. And thank you all so much for your recommendations and your comments in the chat section. Even if I did not read them out, please rest assured that your comments will be included in the overall meeting report. So thank you very much for that. And I'm going to ask my speakers to just take 30 seconds to give their commitments on what they are going to do as we finish this call right now to ensure that they contribute to achieving the decade of action for sustainable development, and they contribute to the post-COVID-19 recovery. So I'm going to call you one by one in just 30 seconds. Just say your commitments. Don't say thank you to anyone. I'll thank them on your behalf. Don't say bye to anyone. I'll say bye to everyone. Just give your commitment in 30 seconds, okay? Let me start quickly with Sicelo.
Okay, so I think for me, it's about making sure that we innovate and we commercialize and let the things go into our markets and make sure that you know, we benefit from our talent, especially as Africa.
We want your commitment. What is Sicelo going to do after?
So one commitment is to continue to encourage the commercialization of ideas from students into practicality.
Awesome. Alberto?
My commitment is to raise awareness and capacity building in areas like climate change and disaster risk reduction on the continent to create a more sustainable and resilient Africa.
Awesome. Serge?
Yeah, as a researcher, my commitment is to make sure that there is a real data to inform policymakers about the innovation that has been going on in Africa, and also helping young people to come out with great ideas. Thank you.
Fantastic, Mr. Researcher. Moving on to Laurence, your commitment.
Yes, so as a young leader, my commitment is to keep on the DDI, which we say keeping on the data dialogue to influence decision makers to have the African we want, which is our motherland.
Viva, Madam DDI. Interesting. Now moving on to Kelly Eve, your commitment.
My commitment is to continue creating spaces for bold collective imagination where we don't try to solve current problems that aren't ours to solve, but create new infrastructure and we can play and make mistakes and sharpen our fullness and occupy our imaginations.
Great, and you commit to also ensuring that you ask them to stop stealing our money, right?
100%.
Moving now to Waven, your 30 seconds commitment.
Commit to advocating for the protection and promotion of girls' and women's rights so that they can be free to explore their creativity and innovation.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Angela, are you back to share your commitment?
I think so, I hope so. But I commit to not sitting on any panels that don't have a young woman of color or a young woman living with disability.
Wow, brilliant. Thank you so much. And I think those are the commitments that we have for today. So I want to say is there anybody in the panel who just wants to say something very quickly before I close off? I know earlier on others had wanted to add onto your colleagues' comments. Before I close off, is there any panelist speaker who wants to say something very important that's a burning comment?
Yes, I do. Thanks, Gigi. And it's the issue to do with government, how the government can support. Kelly said something interesting to say, sometimes in Africa, when there's so much poverty, the investors are not even interested in much. But if the government can consider that not only the innovations or the ideas that give money tomorrow are important, then right now Africa could be having biotech firms and proper infrastructure for vaccines. Right? So every time when it's about innovation and about giving grants or business, everyone is thinking of chickens because after 6 weeks, you have the money back. But why can't we invest in science and technology labs such that we can also do our own things? But in science, you need 5 years on research, but give me the $1 million every year for me to get there. We need government policies that also consider investing in long-term projects in science and technology. I think that is very important as we build back better.
Absolutely true. Thank you so much for that, Sikelo. And I'll assume that nobody else wants to say anything. So I'm going to now just quickly close off. But before I do that, I'm going to share a comment from Ugochi Obidiego. I'm very sorry if I'm not pronouncing it properly, but I want to share it because I think it's a good summary and connects very well to Siklelo's response. Ugochi says 3 things that government can do are: 1, provide basic infrastructure to reduce cost of doing business for young people. 2, provide affordable and accessible internet infrastructure. 3, create a market for the product that young people are creating. This is a perfect summary of what we have been discussing. You know, young people need to have access to the funding, to the support infrastructure. And, you know, if we're going to use technology and innovation to transform lives and achieve sustainable development, the technology needs to be affordable, it needs to be reliable, and it needs to be accessible. Not when we're still having these regular power cuts, you know, not when data is still so expensive that you need to decide whether you're buying rice tonight or you're going to be buying your data, you know, not when there's so much corruption and nepotism that ideas or funding is not awarded on merit, but it's awarded on who you know and who they know as well, or how better you smile when you go there. And not when we are still not creating a market for African products, because a lot of our young Africans, they do create brilliant products. They create applications, they create innovations, softwares, and so a lot of these things, but we are not consuming them, you know. Somebody was reminding me the other day that, in fact, long before WhatsApp came along, there's a young Zimbabwean who designed a social interaction application, you know, and we didn't take it up in Africa. But of course, WhatsApp came along and then we all took it up. So why is it that we are not deliberate and unapologetic about consuming local products, homegrown talents and innovations? Because if we don't consume these, then where are the young people going to sell them? Who are they going to give them to if we as Africans are not going to consume that? So just to end off, this panel, I want to say thank you so much to the organizers for putting this together. I think it went very well, even though it was fully virtual for the first time. I'm also grateful to all the power corporations in Africa for not cutting our electricity during this session today. And I'm mostly grateful to all of you for finding time in your busy schedule to participate in this session. Continue the conversation online using the hashtag Youth20Africa. Connect with all these speakers. Get them to mentor you. They were talking about mentorship, and maybe they are open to being mentored by you. So connect with them, follow them on social media, and engage with them. And make sure you fill out the survey on post meeting. It's going to be sent to you via email immediately after this meeting. It'll only take a few minutes. So please make sure you fill it, and so that you give the organizers feedback on how this session went. And from my side, I just want to say you need to keep on being the change. You want to see the difference, bringing the solution, living that Pan-African dream, and know that change doesn't happen when you keep pointing fingers at someone else. It has to start from within. Ask yourself, what am I doing today to make Africa better or to create the Africa that I want to see? Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure moderating the session, and have a blessed day wherever you are. Bye. Kwaheri. Khosiami.
Good.